Okay, so it's lesson 9, part 2, and we're going to have a look at our cart link, and we'll see if we can create a little badge. We won't spend too long on it, but if we can create a badge here, then we'll build a simple checkout page. We'll maybe get signed up for our Stripe payment gateway accounts, and then we'll pause for today. So I promise we will absolutely be done by 1 o'clock today, if not earlier. I know everyone's did a lot of work on their assignment, so I think a bit of a lighter class and no quiz this week is probably in order. So let's go to our shop controller. And maybe what we want to do in our cart page, maybe before we load the cart, we can count. Since we've already got the list of items here, we could count them and store them in a session variable. And then in our layout file, we can check if that session variable exists. We could try to display it as a little badge here beside our cart link. We'll give that a try. I haven't actually, usually I code everything before class to make sure how things are going to work. Let's try it. Count. And write to session variable play in the navbar. So we can do var item count equals cart items dot count. So we can set int 32. We can set it called maybe a variable called item count. And we'll set it equal to our item count variable. Now keep in mind, when we can think about how this works, this is counting how many different products are in the cart. It's not counting the quantity of each product. So we don't have to do it this way. Let's maybe actually think about this. Should we show the number? Do these badges show the number of products, or do they show the number of individual items? I'll add this code in here. I'll put it in the chat, but we'll maybe try a site. Let's see what happens if we do this. You'd say different types of items. Okay, well, I'm open to suggestions, and you can do it however you want. Here, let's go. I'll go to a bookstore. I'll put a few items in the cart, but I'll pick different quantities, and we'll see what Indigo does. And you can feel free to try on any e-commerce site. You can go to Amazon, go to Canadian Tire. So let's say books on ASP.net. So there's 11 people in the class. One second, Justin. Okay, so it shows me one item here. If I add to cart, maybe I'll update my quantity. Okay, so Ivan, what happens if you do different quantities? Still shows 3? So I've got, let's say, 4 of these. See, this actually sums the quantity. So I have 2 different products. But in this case, they're actually not counting the number of products. They're counting the number of individual items. What about on Walmart? If you update the quantity. Okay, Walmart did the same. So in that case, we'll maybe follow suit. I'll maybe try it on one other site. Oh, I need a few things. The lid on my mailbox blew off, so I need a new mailbox. So let's see. I will add something to my cart here, and we'll see whether if I add 2 of them, does my cart show 1 item or 2? Okay, so it does show 2. So maybe I'll change this. It looks like the standard is to count the actual quantities. So instead of doing count, I want to sum cart items. So let's see. Okay. I won't use count in this case anyway, Justin, coming to your question. Let's see. So we're going to do from C in context.carts. Select C.quantity dot sum. And I'll put that in a bracket. So we're going to write a query that sums up all of the quantities. Whoops. Where C.customer ID equals only for this customer. We don't want all the carts, all the shopping cart items, only the items. So we're going to get the items for this customer, and we're going to take a running sum of the quantity. And then we'll store that in a session variable. So I'll rewrite this code. So we're not counting the products, the number of different products. We're actually counting the number of individual items. So if the user buys 5 of one product, the item count will say 5, it won't say 1. And then we can check our session item count in our layout file. If it's not null, we can display that using a bootstrap by using a little badge class, I think. So there's our code. Let's see if we can get it to work. So maybe after my cart link, I'll try an if So if that doesn't equal null, okay, so it doesn't recognize this, our session, so we may have to add a using statement at the top. If this gets too messy, I'll just stop. Let's see here. It's gonna work. Nope. Okay. I'm going to need to check how we can reference. I haven't tried this before, to display a session variable this way in a view. Let's check. Display. And I won't take too long about this. Okay. I think here's the reference. We need ASP.NET Core HTTP. All right, let's try this at the top. Reference to ASP.NET Core.HTTP. Let's see if I add that reference. Okay, I'm going to ignore this error for a minute. We'll just add I don't know if this is going to run. I'm going to try it anyway. I don't expect it to work, but I'm going to try. Oh, it says I just use context. Try that. And then if this displays a number, we can use a Bootstrap badge class around this. Put it in a little span tag or whatever Bootstrap tells us. We'll just see if it works. So I'll go back to my home page. It should wipe out my cart, so I shouldn't see anything here. But I'm hoping when I put something in the cart that I get a little number beside it. So I'll pick 2 of these. Okay, that didn't seem to do anything. We'll just check a Bootstrap badge. I'll format it and then I'll move on. I think we're close, but let's see. I could just, okay, so I could just give it a span of class equals badge. I don't think it's showing up. I'm not sure why. So our session variable is called item count. And yeah, we called it item count. I'll just run it with my debugger for just a second, just to make sure my item count is being filled properly. And then I'm going to move on. We'll build our checkout page. I don't think we're too far off. So I'll let the site load. My cart should be empty to start. Again, I'll add to it, and I'll try to check my session variable just to see what's happening. So item count starts at 0. That's fine. Okay. Oh. I need an at symbol. It's hard coding my value here. I need an at symbol. And I guess this should be does not equal 0. That's why. If it doesn't equal 0, try it one more time. So if item count is not 0, put something in the cart, get 3 of these. Okay, now it shows. Obviously, it's not in the right place. It needs a bit of formatting. But it does display, if I keep shopping, put something else in the cart, it now updates. Okay. I'm not sure if I put it, I maybe want to put the anchor tag after. That might be part of the issue. And I'm not exactly sure why I'm not getting my badge class. Oh, maybe I'll try like badge secondary. I'll put it inside my link. So rather than after my anchor tag, my badge is actually inside my anchor tag. Try one more time. Okay, there we go. So if I keep shopping and buy something else, it tells me there's 3 items in my cart. So I can leave and go anywhere. So there's the final code. So if our session item count is not 0, we're displaying a badge and rendering that number inside of our link. And we referenced microsoft.aspnetcore.http at the top. We're going to build one more file today. It isn't going to take us very long, and then I will let you guys go. Does anybody have any questions about the badge before we move on to build our checkout page? I go back to my cart, right? I have a checkout page. If I click the link, it calls my checkout method. This method doesn't exist. So we first want to build a get version of this method, and then we'll add a post method as well. So it'll build a checkout form that we can submit. But we can use scaffolding to build the page. We're not going to have to build it ourselves. So let's go up here. Okay, let me give you a couple of quick files on Blackboard. Bear with me for just a second. Did I create them in the other class? We need to create 2 new models and run a migration. So what we want is to create, I'll put the models up for you on Blackboard. I'll just grab the code from one of my other classes where we're a week ahead. So the first model we want is an order model. And then we also want to build an order detail model. So this is going to be models. Order.cs. So you can just copy and paste the code right off of Blackboard for this. So here's the order model. And I'm also going to create the order detail model. So there's a one-to-many relationship. One order has many order details. One order detail is for one and only one order. So if you refresh your week 9 folder, there's 2 items here. First, I'm going to create models, order.cs. So you can just copy the fields here. And in your project, you can right-click models and create a new class. So the first class we'll call order. Singular. Model names are generally singular, they're not plural. So create order.cs. And inside the class definition, I'm just going to paste those properties. We've got an order ID primary key, the date, the customer, the address, city, province, and postal code, as well as the total. This error will go away in a minute when we create the order detail. I've also got an error on line 17. It's not recognizing this display name. Excuse me. We can just add the reference. Oops. To system.component model.data annotations. We add that reference. My error on line 18, it disappears. So I'll save that file. And then I want to create another model called order detail, again, singular. There's no S's. It should be order detail spelled just like this. And the code for that one is also on Blackboard. So save your order.cs. And go back and make a new model. Add a class. Again, this one is order detail. Again, it's singular. So let's add. And all of the properties for the order detail class, they're here on Blackboard. Just copy those. Paste them in and save. So we've got our order detail class. It has two foreign keys. Every order detail has an order ID. So it's got an order parent. It also has a product ID. So it also has a product parent. So order detail is kind of like a junction table between orders and products. Orders and products would have a many-to-many relationship. One order can have many products, and one product can be on many orders. So the order detail table, it combines both of them, both foreign keys, so we know which order has which product. So once you add your order detail, this last line of your order method that was showing an error before, that error now goes away. Now that we've got both order and order detail models. So we've created two models, two new models. We've got a new structure for our data schema. What would our next step be then? What do we have to do now that our web application has two new models? There's an important step we need to perform now that we've changed the data schema. Yep, you got it, Liam. So we're going to need to create a migration. Yep, you're right, Justin. So we first need to make references to these two classes in which file. The file's already open on my screen. You can see it. Which file do we want to modify to reference the new order and order details models before we do the migration? It's one of the tabs I already have open. So we created models before. We've created carts, products, and categories. And we've declared them globally in which one of these files. Good guess. No, it's not the order details. We need new DB set objects for orders and order details. Right, Ivan, you got it. So in our database connection, right, these are the existing models, categories, products, and carts. Before we run our migration, we need to declare DB sets for order and order details here too. So new models for checkout. So we're going to create a DB set of type order. And a second one of type order detail. So we've got to create these two new models. Otherwise, we can create a migration, but it will be empty. These declarations here, they're going to populate our new migration from our order model and order detail. So now, as Liam and Justin suggested, now we can go ahead and create a new migration and update the database. So we've built our models. We've added them to our application DB context. And now we can create the migration and update the database. So this is the process anytime we add a new model to the application. So I'm going to go to my Package Manager console. And I'm going to run the command add-migration, and I'll just give it a descriptive name. So create order and order detail. Oops, I'll call it create orders and order details tables. The name is just a description. It can't have any spaces in it. So you don't have to use this name. But if you use a name of your own, make sure there are no spaces, and it should be descriptive. So I'm going to hit enter to run this migration, and Visual Studio is going to generate a new migration script file with this name and the current date and timestamp. And Visual Studio, once that's done, that file is going to actually open in a new tab here. It said my build succeeded. And then it opens it up. It's time-stamped today and now with the name I gave it. And it's going to create an orders table. And then it's going to also create the order details table with one primary key and two foreign keys. So now I can run the command update-database. And this is going to build two new tables in SQL Server for us. So it's done. I'll just go and have a quick look and make sure my database has my two new tables. So I added the migration and I updated the database. I'm going to connect in Management Studio, open up my database, and now we can see here are our new tables. Here's orders and order details. And they have all of the columns that come from our new models. So here's our order table, and here's our order details with the foreign keys we need. So we want to use this order model to create a checkout page, and we'll use scaffolding so we don't have to build the page ourselves. Scaffolding will give us a working page that we can then modify a little bit. So we're going to write both a get and a post method for checkout, and then we're going to stop for today. Once you've created your models, declared them in application DB context, and then added your migration and updated the database, you should be good to go. Now, we're not actually going to save orders to the database today. We'll do that next week because we need to process payments first. There's no point saving an order to the database until we know the customer has made a valid payment. But we're still going to use this model to design the checkout page. So in our shop controller, I'm going to create a new method down here. It's going to be get shop checkout. That will be the URL. We just want to return a view here. So we're going to load a checkout page to get some information from our customer. We want to get their address, their city, their province, and postal code. I'm also going to add here the authorize decorator. So up until this point, a user does not have to log into the site. They can browse the cart, they can put items in the cart, they can remove, but once they hit checkout, we're going to make them log in. We're not going to offer the guest checkout feature. We want them to log in because if they log in, it also means that we can then show them all of their past order history. When you check out as a guest, you don't have that ability. So I'm going to add authorize here, and I need to add a reference to Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authorization. Same thing we did in our products and our categories controllers. So I'll accept that reference. So there's our method. It's pretty simple. I'll put it on paste bin. But nothing new here. Simple method with no parameters. It returns a view, but users must be logged in to access it. They don't have to be administrators. We don't want them to be administrators. Just anybody with an account can load the checkout method. So now we just need to build a checkout view. And we can use scaffolding for this. So in my Solution Explorer, inside of Shop, I'll right-click and I want to add a view. So we're still in the Shop folder. So we want to add a new view. We want to pick Razor View. We don't want it to be empty. We want to scaffold out a checkout form. So pick Razor View, and then click Add. The view name in this little pop-up box that says Add Razor View, we want to call it Checkout. Our template is going to be create because we're going to give the user an empty form and ask them to provide information, contact information. Our model is going to be the new order model. And then our data context class will be the same one as always. We only have one, which is application DB context. We'll use a layout page. So here are all the properties. I'll leave this up on my screen for a minute. Inside the Views Shop folder, we're creating a new Razor view with the name of Checkout. So it matches the name of our method on line 139 of the controller. The template is create, so it'll build an empty form, and it will use the order model. So there'll be inputs for the customer, address, city, postal code, and province. So we'll click Add. This is going to build a form. we'll want to make a few changes to it. We'll see what it looks like, but you'll see. So here's our form. It says checkout, and it's got a whole bunch of, it's got a form here with a bunch of inputs and a create button at the bottom. So let's try this out. So I'll go back to my cart, which is going to get wiped out. I think it's going to get wiped out. I'll put an item in the cart again, and then I'm going to go to checkout. Okay, so I'll start shopping. I'll put something in my cart. One item is enough. I'll click checkout. It's going to force me to log in. So I'm going to use the customer account I created. And I told my browser to remember the password. The password I suggested, so here was the login. I recommended everybody create customer1@gc.ca with test123$. So this was the credential I suggested we create weeks ago so that you don't have to register again. If that credential doesn't work, you can even log in with Google if that's working. That's fine too. So I'm going to log in. It's now got my email here, and it brings me to my checkout page. So this is good. It's useful. It needs some cleanup. What changes do we want to make to this page? Right, okay, we're going to hide the date. Yep, we're going to put that in the controller. We'll just get the current date and time and put that in. Yep, same with the customer ID, right? We can just grab the email address of the customer. So we can remove both of these. Anything else? Okay, yep, the total we're going to autofill. So order date, customer ID, and total we're going to autofill. Yeah, so maybe we'll just display the total, but rather than as a text box, that's a good idea. We could just display it as HTML. We could add the items to the cart, maybe a bit complex for here, but I like the idea of at least showing the total, but as a read-only field. Okay, anything else? Down at the bottom, I see a couple of items. Would you leave the bottom like this? Yeah, order, or actually what we want, we'll maybe change it to say payment, because that's going to be the next screen. We'll build the payment form next week, but we'll change the button. We could also get rid of the back to list, because that calls the index method. So, and this here, we've got checkout and order. So we could probably get rid of this heading. So just let's make some of these HTML changes on here. So I'm going to get rid of the H4 tag on line 10. We don't need it. I'm also going to get rid of the first two form groups on the form that say order date and customer ID. So just delete those entirely. The first form group should be the address. Okay, so our form will have address, city, province, postal code. I think for simplicity, to keep this method really simple, I'm just going to get rid of the total entirely. Rebecca, we could show it here, but I think we'll actually show it on, I'm going to show it on the payment page. That way we don't have to write any code in this checkout method, because otherwise we'd have to write it in the, we'd have to add some code here to calculate it and display it. So just for simplicity, I'll just take the total out. We will show it on the next page, on the payment page. And then on the button, we can just have it say, we could have it say next or continue to payment. I'll maybe make my button say that, continue to payment. So I've just removed my H4. I've removed the order date and customer ID form groups, and I removed the total form group. So there's only 4 inputs on here now. They're all highlighted in gray, just address, city, province, postal code. I did actually forget a field for the customer's first and last names. We could have put those in our order model. No big deal. We have their email address, good enough. I'm not going to go back and we'd have to modify the model, create a new migration. We'll just rescaffold this page. We'll just skip it. We can order with an email address and a mailing address. Okay, so I'll save those changes. Oh, and I'm going to get rid of this back to list at the bottom as well. The other thing I could do is I'll just make all of these required. And maybe my address, I'll change from a regular input. I'll just change that to a text area in case someone's got a long address. And the text areas don't self-close. So I'll just change this tag on line 17 for address from an input, and I'll add a closing tag. But I'll make all of these required. We could require them in our model as well. For today, I'll just add the HTML5 validation to the form. And then I'll go back and I'll try the process one more time. So our form action, ASP action is checkout. So it's going to load the same page, but as a post. So just go back and try it. I'll start shopping again. Because this uses, well, we'll see if it should keep me logged in because I'm in the same browser session. We'll see. I may have to log in again. Not quite sure. Okay, I'm still logged in. We'll add a couple items to the cart. Now I can go to checkout. I'm logged in already, so I can skip the login screen this time. Okay, so now I get everything's required. I can just put in an address here and click continue. And nothing happens because we haven't written a post method. So all we really want to do in the post method is populate the 3 fields we took out of here. So we automatically want to timestamp the order, grab the customer's email, calculate the total, and then we want to store the order in a session variable. So we can continue on to the next page because we actually will need a couple of pages. So we may need a couple of pages to pay. So it would be helpful to store everything about the order in a session variable. So now in our controller, this is the last thing we'll do today. We now want to write the post method. Shop checkout. So again, we need to authorize it. If you're not logged in, you can't call it. We want to declare this is the HTTP post version. And we're going to also call validate anti-forgery token. That protects against cross-site scripting attacks. So users can't build a form on their own domain and post to our shop checkout. So in our checkout method, we're getting 4 inputs from our form. We want to bind the address, city, province, and postal code. So these 4 values are coming from our form, and we are populating an order object. The properties we removed from the form. So our order.orderDate will be equal to the current date and time. So we can just use a built-in .NET function, which is datetime.now. Our customer ID is equal to the user.identity.name. That's going to give us the customer's email address. Oops. Our total we can calculate with the query. Context.carts. Actually, sorry, we'll use the same query we used before. From C in context.carts, where so we're going to write a query that gives us the total value of the cart. Take all the items for this customer, multiply the quantity by the price for each item, and then add all of those together. Now we want to store this in a session variable. We want to store the whole order. The problem is we need a little bit of help to do this. Now store order in a session variable for moving to payment. So I could try http context.session. The problem is this order, this is a complex object, right? We've got different properties, we've got strings, we've got decimal numbers. The problem is our session, built-in session, it only allows us to store 3 kinds of values: a byte value, an integer value, or a string. The order is none of these. It's an order object. It's one of these classes. So by default, we can't store this in a session variable. So we have a little workaround, a little way around this. Just going to comment that out. There's a little extension library that a developer wrote that we can use that will allow us to store a complex object like an order inside of a session variable. So the link to this is on Blackboard. We're basically really just going to copy and paste here. Sorry, it would probably help if I gave you the right link, which I will put onto Blackboard now. And I'll also put in the chat. So here's the link. So extending .NET core session object. So I've put the link in the chat. If you're watching at home, the link is on Blackboard. We're just going to follow it, copy and paste it, and then we can use this library. So what this little library does, it explains we've only got 3 set methods. Set accepts a byte, set int accepts an integer, and set string accepts a string. So what this developer's done is given us a way to create complex objects instead. So he actually uses JSON. It will take our object, like our order, and create a JSON representation. So if we scroll down here, sorry, he's got 2 methods right here, set object and get object. This converts it to JSON, and get reads it back out of JSON. So what we're going to do is create a new class, and then we're going to copy and paste these methods. So follow the link. It's in the chat and it's on Blackboard. Follow this link to extend the session object. And I'm going to go to Visual Studio and quickly create a class, and then we're going to copy and paste it in. So I'm going to click on my web project, not the solution at the very top, but the Get Me a Game project in bold. I'm going to right-click it. I'm going to choose Add a Class. And we're going to call this class Session Extensions. This just comes right from his tutorial. So call the class Session Extensions. I'm going to put a link here, so source code from library to store complex objects in a session variable using JSON. And I'm going to go back to the tutorial. I'm just going to copy this whole block of code. This first block here that starts with public static class session extensions. So copy those 13 lines of code. And I'm just going to delete what's inside here and paste it in. And then there's a couple of missing references we'll make. So this is going to allow us to store our order object in the session and then retrieve our order object from the session. So if you mouse over the errors, just accept the references. Microsoft ASP.NET Core HTTP, and the reference to newtonsoft.json. So this is the library Microsoft uses for working with JSON data in ASP.NET. So I've just copied and pasted that code. I'll put it on paste bin as well. We're just about done. Here's the link to it if you need the final code, but it's pretty much the same as what's in the tutorial. So you'll get a few errors until you add these 2 references. So now that we've created this class, we can use it. So I can go back to my shop controller, and we can now call setObject. So we can save our order with all the information about this order. We can save it to a session variable. So I'll go back here now. So now we can call setObject. We'll create an object called order, and we're now going to save. And lastly, load the payment page. This will just give us a blank screen for now. That's fine. We'll build this next week. So there's our checkout page. So we won't actually see anything. It's just going to take the address, city, province, and postal code from the form, bind those to the order, and then auto-populate the date, ID, and total, stick it in a session object, and go on to the next page. So I'll try this out. I'll put all this up on Pastebin as well. We're finished for today. I said we might register for Stripe today. I'll just send out the link by email, and you can do it from home anytime before next week's class. We don't need to do it right now. So I'm going to try this out, and I will upload everything to GitHub in a moment. Okay, I'm going to see, Justin, if I get the same result as you. So I'm going to add something to the cart. You may be missing brackets. I'll add another item to the cart. I'll go to checkout. Okay, so no error. So that's where we want to leave it. Justin, I'll leave the code up. You do need brackets around this, everything before the dot sum. So that little session extensions library is really helpful if we want to store anything in a session variable in .NET that is not an integer or a string. We can use that extension to store more complex objects. So I will send out a link with some simple instructions. Signing up for Stripe is really quick and easy. It'll only take a few minutes. Okay, great. That's good, Justin. And it's free. So next week, we want to build a payment page that's going to work with the Stripe payment gateway. And they give us instructions with all sorts of different languages. How do we integrate a payment? So they give us a sandbox so we can send through test transactions without actually charging our credit card. So all the instructions are here. We'll go through this together next week so we can send test payments to Stripe. And if they're successful, we'll use our order and order details model to save to the database and then show the user an order confirmation with the total and all the items in the order. Okay, are there any questions? I'm going to stop the recording. Any questions before we stop for